So the World Health Organization, the WHO, is obviously a well-respected organization. And I think it's important that we look at current guidelines for all health recommendations with a really keen eye, really wanting to understand the truth. And yes, there's absolutely a lot more reliability when a certain overseeing body that's reliable gives us information. But I don't think that we should always take that at face value. Now, if you're the everyday person and this is not your career, you're like, well, how am I going to know what you know what I mean? But definitely for me, being that this is what I do. Okay, let's cut to the chase. The World Health Organization basically doubled down on their recommendation to be limiting salt intake. They released a 99-page report saying that high salt intake is...
Stop there for 1 second. 99 pages on how to eat salt. Who, excuse the pun for 1 second, hilarious me, is going to read 99 pages on a condiment or whatever you want to call it? Imagine that. 99 pages on your ketchup, 99 pages on your mayonnaise, 99 pages on your mint sauce, 99 pages on whether you have, peri-peri seasoning on your chips. Or really? Okay. Anyway,
well, that's the thing, is most people think of it as just like a condiment. They think of it as, but it's an essential nutrient.
Exactly.
And so their claim is that if we limit salt intake to 2 grams per day, which is already the current cutoff.
Is that just adult, or is that specified into male or female, the way alcohol or some other things would be?
General guideline. Don't go over 2 grams of salt a day.
Right.
And they're saying that if we actually stuck to that, because most people don't stick to that because there's so much salt in processed foods. Right. If we stuck to that, we'd be saving 7 million lives by, I think, 2030. It's a lot of lives.
These aren't salt mining lives. These aren't people down the mines gathering salt. This is not industrial injuries, right? This is disease stuff you're talking about, right?
Stuff, especially heart. That's really the big one. Heart disease, heart attacks.
Okay, so where's the error? Because there's clearly an error.
Well, the error is that so many things. Okay, salt is an essential nutrient, right? I mean, we were just talking about this the other day, right? Like salt licks.
Yeah.
I had a bunny. Did I ever tell you about Skippy?
You did a little bit, yeah.
When I was little, and we used to give Skippy salt licks in the summer, right? So we know that it's important. They do this in the zoos too, yeah?
Right, and anyone with a horse is going to have a salt lick. Any of the big ungulates in the zoo, your elephants, your rhinoceros, your leopard, where did that come from? Giraffe was what I was trying to say in my head. They need to have salt. It's not like, oh, well, let's make their food a bit tastier. No, this is absolutely life and death stuff.
Okay, so we know it's important. We know it's an electrolyte. It plays a role in neuronal connections and firings, and it's...
Yeah, let's just preface that. So without salt, your neurons don't fire. So that's not just now your arm won't move, right? If you give it a command to do it, right? We're talking about thinking processes. We're talking about running the autonomic nervous system, keeping your heart beating, keeping your eyes blinking, right? I mean, this is literally life and death stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your question that you asked before is really key. You said, well, is it specific to your size, your sex, what is it specific to? Nothing. So let's think about this. When we sweat, what do we lose?
Water. Salt and water.
Salt, potassium, right? Our electrolytes. What happens when people drink too much water?
Dilutes it all.
Yeah, right. That's a thing. That's actually really common for newer endurance athletes, is they rehydrate too much. When I worked in the gym years ago, I'd see people who would drink 2 gallons of water a day. And it's Okay, but like, really, is that necessary? You're like lifting weights. You're not even, anyway, inside in an air-conditioned building. So it makes sense that you would have different needs based on your body. Like, how much are you sweating? How active are you? Right, we're losing water when we breathe. So if for someone who has chronic diarrhea, like all of these things are going to change your needs of how much salt your body's losing and how much you need to bring in. So this idea that the cutoff is 2 grams and everyone needs to follow that, I think it's irresponsible and I think it's dangerous, especially for people who are active, especially for people who live in hotter climates, because we're telling them this is a bad thing, don't eat it, don't consume it, when actually, if you don't and your needs are higher, you're going to be getting a lot of issues: brain fog, muscle cramps, fatigue, all of these things. And get this, it's not just athletes. Like, I work with people all the time where when they say, I really need that cup of coffee at like 1 p.m., I'm often like, have you tried taking a shot of salt? And they're like, you're the craziest person they've ever met. And then they do it and they're like, oh my gosh, I feel better. I can think clearer. I don't need that second cup of coffee. Like, this has very real ramifications for people. The other problem is even just the cutoff in general, having it at the 2 grams, is not really based on literature. There's a big, and I can link to this whole, there's
the 99 pages. No,
there's a really good summary from a company that I really like and respect that I can link to, and they have pull a lot of studies, and you can kind of look at it if you want to get nitty gritty. So for the sake of it, I'm not going to get into like, there was a 2018 JAMA study that was a meta-analysis that said, right? No one wants to hear that, but I'll link it if you want to. So there's a lot of data that actually shows that the optimal need is actually double. It's actually closer to 4 grams, not 2 grams per day. Now,
and can we clarify something else just before we expand on that? We're not talking about processed salt here.
Yes.
Right. We're talking about mineral salt, real salt, sea salt, pink salt, this kind, right?
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, if you're going for the Himalayan sea salt, or, if you're going for like salt, the Himalayan salt, sea salt, these more mineral rich, less processed, yes, you're going to be getting more of the minerals in it. To be honest, it's not that different. Like, it's really, we're talking very, very, very small amounts, even compared to what you would need. Like, you already don't need a lot of minerals, but you need them. Like, they're so important, right? But like, the amount doesn't really contribute that much, but it does contribute. I mean, realistically, like, you could do table salt too. You want to make sure that it's not iodized, because you don't want to OD on iodine. Like, iodine is also an important nutrient, but if you're an athlete and you're using iodized salt to like replenish, that's too much iodine. So yeah, ideally on processed salt, but also if you don't have it, it's okay too. But I think that the key thing is, where's the salt found in? You know what I mean?
No.
Like, what is the salt coming from a McDonald's cheeseburger?
Oh, right. I'm like, what kind of mountain has this? I'm back in nature, not McDonald's.
Yeah, like, is this salt that you're adding to your food at home? You've cooked a whole food, fresh meal, and you're adding salt to it, or is this like a deep fried whatever with a ton of salt? Like, they're two very different things. And in fact, when you add salt to your food, you taste it a lot more, versus when you eat baked goods are actually have a lot of salt along with the other things. Or, again, like going out to eat like fast food, processed food has a lot of salt that you don't really taste as well. But we have to think about what else is coming into this equation. What else is coming into this meal? So because of this, people who eat more salt tend to be eating the processed foods, because it's really hard to get that much salt. Like, my salt needs are very high. Like, it's made a drastic difference in like my personal quality of life to start significantly increasing my salt intake. And to be honest, it's hard. It's hard for me to get enough salt. Otherwise I feel faint, I feel fatigued, I like lose my balance. It's like pretty intense.
Let me introduce you to my non-tequila tequila slammer. Like, because that's a really cool hack.
What is it?
So you know how you have tequila with the salt and the lemon, yeah?
Yeah.
Right. Well, first of all, I hate tequila, so that you do you if that's a thing. But I will like, no, let's not have the tequila. So I have a small glass of water in which I add the salt, the lemon juice, and apple cider vinegar. So that same kind of, wow, okay, it's pretty there on your mouth. The same way as if you did your, thing with your tequila, right?
Sometimes that's what I do with my salt water.
So if you need to replenish it, because drinking, like imagine drinking that of seawater, like nobody wants to do that. So I make it small. I put the salt in. This would be something on a really hot day or after some serious level of sweating and exercise or a massive sauna where getting it all out and you really want to replace. So water, the pinch of salt, the salt that you want to, and I use pink salt or sea salt. I've got both. And Cornish sea salt. You can use Brittany sea salt. That's really clean as well. And then lemon juice. And then apple cider vinegar. And the lemon juice and the apple cider vinegar bring in flavors that your mouth can cope with, because otherwise that salt really is not entirely pleasant. And then you just toss that back. And you've just done amazing things for your blood sugar, because the apple cider vinegar is resetting your GI, like your glucose and your blood sugar and insulin levels, and doing an amazing detox thing and a bunch of other stuff in your system. The lemon juice is also a cleanser and a detox. So it's really powerful. So if you ever feel like you're flagging, don't go for the coffee, go for the non-tequila tequila slammer.
Tequila slammer. I love that. So yeah, so people who tend to be getting a lot of salt aren't the people doing what you just said.
No, I don't think many people do what I just said.
They're eating a lot of processed food, and so they're eating a lot of other not great nutrients. Right? Sure. So this is where we get into a lot of trouble. The other thing is that people who have high blood pressure, a lot of these models that we use to identify risk and what is the ideal range of salt intake and all that, is that we're using people who have high blood pressure as sort of like the baseline.
Right.
And the problem is, if you have high blood pressure, there's an underlying metabolic issue happening. And that tends to make, when you have a metabolic imbalance, that tends to make you more sensitive to salt intake as it's related to your blood pressure. So if you have a metabolic condition, which a lot of people do, then you actually do want to monitor your salt intake while you're addressing the root cause, right? But to use someone with metabolic disease or syndrome as the baseline doesn't represent our ideal physiology, right?
No, not at all. So is that why you're saying the recommendations are coming in at 50% of the actual sweet spot amount for optimum health?
Yeah, because we're using the wrong models. We're really cherry picking the data. We're really looking at, while yes, there are studies that show that less is better, those tend to be not peer reviewed and be based on some of these not great models. But we're also not including who isn't including the studies that are looking at actually the benefit of having more when you don't use these models. So there's like a couple different layers here. And I think it comes back to an individualized approach. This is why I hate these blanket recommendations. Do this, don't do this, eat that, don't eat that. Like, if you have metabolic if you have metabolic disease and you're restricting your sodium intake because you have high blood pressure, that's probably a good idea if you're working on the underlying root cause. If you're not, if you're healthy and you're active, or even not really that active, you probably need more salt. So like listen to your body and play with it. Like try things, experiment. That's the other thing is we hear these things and it generates a lot of fear. It's like, well, what do you need? What does your body need? And you can use sort of what you know about your health as the guideline, but then try things and see how you feel.
Yeah, that's interesting because, for quite a long time now, that's what I have tried to do is to hone my zoopharmacognosy senses, for want of a better word, and think, what do I actually, like, really, what do I actually feel like? Like, what do I feel is missing? What do I want to eat when you're hungry? What am I drawn to eating right now? And I'll take a minute and I'll sift through and I'll think, do I want this? And I'll land on something and I'll go, yeah, that's actually what I want. And so then I'll go, why? Because I always do. What's this food got in it? What do I know that this food contains that I think and then I was like, when was the last time I ate that? When was the last time I had that nutrient in this particular item of food or something else? And I remember one time I was a kid and I was craving tomato soup, like really craving it. It wasn't just like, I feel like for days, all I could think about was tomato soup. Okay, there it is. And I was like, Mom, I think I'm broken. And she was like, no, you're not broken. Clearly you need something that's inside tomato soup. So let's get you some and see if it goes away. And so she kind of entered into this, very approximate, very sketchy, but, kind of cool little experiment. And she just fed me a lot of tomato soup for the next couple of days until I was like, no, I don't need anymore now. And it's always stuck with me, whether it was the lycopene that was in there, whether it was some salt that it could have been, because, savory, I don't know. But at that point, my body was shouting for it. And when I listened and followed that, and it was that somewhere internally that information was making itself known. Cognitively, I had no idea what the actual thing was. I just knew that I wanted that food. And so that's been a life lesson for me. And so I will often go, what do I actually feel like? I feel like I'm peckish. Do I want to eat? Am I actually really hungry? All those questions. But then, what do I really want? And be dictated by, and sometimes genuinely, there's no word of a lie, I've actually gone to the salt packet, right? I've got Cornish sea salt on the side, right? And I'll just get a pinch of it and I'll just put the salt on my tongue and I'll go, and I'll enjoy it a lot because that's what my body wanted. That doesn't happen often, right? But there are times when that's definitely what my body wanted. And I don't even have to hide it then in my little shot glass of fake tequila slammers.
Yeah, it can be, our bodies are so smart and we've been so conditioned to cut off everything here. Eat this, don't eat that, and these are good foods and these are bad foods, and you should always have this food with this food, and it's very kind of prescriptive especially within the diet culture, but it really permeates outside of that. If you're hungry, if you want the dessert at a party, go drink some water and eat an apple and pretend like you don't want it. It's really toxic. Versus if you allow yourself to eat the foods that you're craving, you'll actually find that if you were to allow yourself to eat the cake every day, you wouldn't, because you don't want it. And occasionally you do, but most of the time you don't. And then you'll also find that you actually crave broccoli sometimes, and sometimes you want watermelon. Imagine that, right? That our bodies are actually smart if instead of shutting it down, we listen to it. So I often ask people, what are the foods that you crave? What are your comfort foods? And often people will say salty things. Okay, well, let's try adding more salt and see how you feel. What's really funny is another little anecdote for you. So I put so much salt on everything. I literally, this is disgusting. People think I'm disgusting. I put salt in my tea. Like I put salt on everything and in everything because I feel better and it tastes better to me. Like I prefer the taste of a lot of salt. And my husband doesn't, okay? So there was this one time where we had gone on a trip and I'm like, I'm a dietitian. Like I bring food ready, like for the plane, and I have like a little oatmeal for our breakfast on the plane, and then I have like a nice salad or a wrap, right? And then I have snacks, and I like bring it all with me, like a whole bag of food through security at the airport.
That's your cabin luggage right there.
Yeah, exactly. My carry-on is like food for the day. And so at one point we come back from our trip, and I guess there were these like oatmeal cups left over. Well, I had forgot that I had pre-salted them because the idea is you take them and you just add water, right? And so I was like, oh, we're out of oatmeal. Like I'll use the little oatmeal cups that I had prepared. And so I made the oatmeal and I salted it. And he was like, I love you. And this is the most disgusting thing I've ever had in my life. Like, what did you do to this? Like, did you put the whole thing of salt in it? I was like, what are you doing? And I had eaten my whole bowl. I was like, this is great. And I was like, oh, I guess I salted it twice.
Mm-hmm.
Like disgusted and appalled and very sweet about it. And then I was like disgusted with myself. Like, how did I not notice? Like I just ate that whole thing and then led me down the path of, oh, I guess my body needs more salt. But on that note, some people also lose more salt when they sweat than other people.
Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, so like you said earlier, we go back to that thing that we always say, everyone's an individual, right? Read your own body, understand, know the guideline, know the principle, know the science, know the starting point, like a really good starting point, and work from there. And maybe you go a little bit outside of that circle, maybe you go a mile out of that circle, but you've got the knowledge to know where to begin and then listen to your body.
And if you need lots of salt, you're not disgusting, I promise.
No, genuinely not. You're just a zebra.
What? Oh, because the salt licks.
Makes sense.
All right. So yes, we'll link to the specific article that I'm referencing is one that a company called LMNT did. They do evidence-based electrolyte drinks, and they do a really good job of summarizing the data and helping to break down this myth that you don't need salt. So we can link to that. Check it out. Let us know what you think. I know this is against what you've heard. So
we'll bring you the truth, whether it's friendly or not. User friendly, maybe. I don't know. What's the word I'm looking for?
Whether it's societally acceptable.